Welcome to the Chantay Golson Show, where every entrepreneur and small business owner want to tune in because we're here to provide media information that's going to help you to either prevent burnout or recover from burnout. We know that these days, burnout is looked at as a badge of honor, according to the World Health Organization statement. But wearing a badge of honor in burnout, stress, and overwhelm is no badge that I want to have. So today we're going to talk with our guest today, Courtney, and she is going to talk to us about her methods and strategies to help overcome burnout. So let me tell you a little bit about our special guest today. Courtney, she's a corporate wellness provider, mindset coach, and yoga teacher. And she leads virtual customized multi-level corporate wellness programs designed to help employees reduce stress, increase productivity, as well as boost morale and create a happier work environment. And her programs, they do support employees' work-life balance while reducing companies' healthcare costs and improving workplace culture. Now, as a certified yoga and meditation teacher, she applies the principles and tools of yoga to her daily life to care for her physical, her mental, her emotional health, and she teaches others to do so as well. Welcome, Courtney, to the Chantay Golson Show. So glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Chantay. It's a pleasure to be here and talk with you today.
Well, absolutely. So let's ask that grand old question, Courtney. What does burnout mean to you?
Well, burnout can be characterized by exhaustion, and it's really a type of multi-level exhaustion. So physically, mentally, emotionally, we feel like we just don't have enough energy, enough interest, enough care in our normal things. So we might feel kind of dull, disinterested, and things really turn into this burnout stage from being chronically stressed. So burnout isn't something that just happens overnight, but it builds up over time with chronic stress that is unresolved.
Now, when you say chronic, I'm sorry to interrupt you. When you say chronic, let's break that down a little bit for those that may not be sure of what the context of chronic means in this area. So share with us about the word chronic.
Sure, a prolonged period of time of unresolved stress. Okay. So we all have different stressors that come up throughout the day and throughout our weeks and months. But if that stress is not resolved, and I can talk more about resolving the stress and what that would mean, but if we're not finding a way to step back away from those stressful situations, then stress can become chronic. We're in that elevated stress mode, I call it, or fight or flight state, where our body is constantly producing those stress hormones that just make us feel on edge and eventually can turn into burnout.
So we have no indication as our cells what our hormones are doing inside. Or is there a way that we can figure out that our hormones are focusing on the direction of our stress? What does that look like for the average person who's burning out?
Yeah, that's a good question because we don't completely know what's happening inside of our body all the time. But with stress, our body gives us some signals, and these signals can look different for everybody. But, it might be things like feeling your heartbeat faster when you're in a stressful situation. You might feel your breath be a bit shorter and maybe more focused in your chest, where it feels harder to take deep breaths. For some people, they might get a physical shakiness or sweaty palms.
Right.
All of these different signs of stress can show some patterns about things that are causing you stress and how your body is reacting. If we start to pay attention to those things and look for patterns in those situations in our daily life.
Okay. So what is the first step in recovering from burnout?
Well, the first step is actually paying more attention to these signs. So if you feel like you are in this place of chronic stress or burnout, getting more aware of what's happening in your body and how you're reacting in certain situations. You might find that you quickly have a snap reaction where you want to have some angry words come out. Or you might find that you, have another immediate reaction. Maybe it's that fast heartbeat when you are about to make a certain type of phone call or have a meeting with a certain person. And just starting to pay attention to these things so that you can get really clear on your starting point, paying attention to what's stressing you out, both personally and at work. And then starting to acknowledge maybe there are those patterns, like I said, where you can make some changes to, alleviate some of that stress and build up your coping tools around those situations.
Okay, so are you stating that the first step is awareness, or is the first step coping? And I'm asking that for a reason, based on paraphrasing what you're saying.
Well, the first step would be awareness so that we know what those stress triggers are. And from there, we can see how to cope with it. So if there's a particular person at work that is creating a lot of stress response in your body, once you know that person is causing you some stress, you can build up your coping tools to handle those conversations and interactions better. So instead of, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you go ahead. I thought you were, go ahead. That's okay.
Just thinking about how that awareness requires putting aside our pride, where we have to, get really clear on what the actual situation is and not wish that it was any different than it actually is. So, we might have those wishes that we do want it to be different, but from there is where we can build up our coping tools. And that clarity and awareness really takes a clear lens, a clear mindset, so that we can look at things the way they actually are. And from there, have that clear starting point to move forward.
And oftentimes we also refer to those stress, indicators as triggers as well. Some people refer to them as that. So we want to go ahead and try to help them to relate the lingo in terms of what you were sharing about identifying not only the trigger or the stress moments, but how to cope with those as well. A lot of times I find that people have difficulties with identifying how they feel in order to be able to develop what to say in those particular moments that will help them to diffuse the stress. In addition to that, one thing that I also notice is that people have difficulties being honest with themselves. So if they can't be honest with themselves and they're in denial, how can they be honest to their team, to their vendors, to even their bank account, if you will. And so with that being stated, when we talk about the root, right? The root cause, how do we start to address these executive burnout moments?
Yeah, that's a really great point, getting down to the root of it. And sometimes we might even find that we think we know the root, and then as we continue and dig a little bit deeper, it might get deeper for us. We might think the root is another person, and it comes to find out it's even ourselves and the way we've been handling a situation. And I think just working on cultivating that self-compassion and kindness is really important so that we can clearly see the situation and do so without judging ourselves, knowing that we're doing the best we can. Especially in this year, we've had a lot of challenging, unexpected, difficult situations. And leadership has really tried to step up in so many ways. So of course, that's going to be taxing and create conditions for burnout. Whatever people are experiencing during this time is okay and perfectly valid. And so we want to allow ourselves that space to be okay with what's happening and work on accepting it instead of trying to resist it. That resistance just creates more stress, actually. We're fighting against reality, and then we get upset with ourselves, upset with other people that things aren't different. And those aren't things we can usually change, only ourselves and our own reactions.
Yeah. And if I were to add to that, my thinking around that is the ability to evaluate yourself. So when we're talking about the word honesty, you must be honest in order to be aware, in order to acknowledge, in order to strategize. And evaluation is the next phase. And how I teach it, you must evaluate yourself, your actions, your habits, and et cetera, to even be able to indicate what needs to be changed. And that's a greater awareness than just your surface. So when you talk about not guilting ourselves, one thing that came to my mind is, what is the difference, or what is that fine line between judging yourself and being honest and evaluating yourself? What comes to mind when I ask you that?
Well, for me, it's a mindfulness practice. And so one of the components of mindfulness is paying attention to how things are in the moment, again, in that non-judgmental lens. Mm-hmm. So when we really dig down and get clear on the situation, maybe it involves analyzing data or doing some analyses or conducting surveys of what's going on in the company culture. Mm-hmm. That information can be very telling, and it's fairly factual. So creating that lens of, I'm going to look at this as a starting point and a means to improve from there, mm-hmm. is really helpful when we're looking at how to move forward in a positive way and grow and make helpful changes. So all of that judgment and self-negativity can really hold us back from making that type of progress.
Yeah, it can, but it also can make us run. And what I mean by that is I'm going to keep pulling out just simple terms, make us run from our truth. So according to you, executive burnout is much more than just the individual, but the individual can be a problem within that large culture aspect. So how does a person's individual burnout affect the company's culture? And interestingly enough, this question comes to me, can a culture burn out?
Absolutely. The effects of burnout, especially in leadership, can really trickle down through the entire organization. Mm-hmm. And if employees see leaders overworking, carrying unreasonable workloads, mm-hmm. maintaining really high expectations and long work hours, employees will see that that's what they have to live up to. Yeah. And if those conditions are setting the stage for burnout or maybe perpetuating burnout, then other employees are living up to that model that is unhealthy and unsustainable. Mm-hmm. So executive burnout, leadership burnout really affects the entire company culture. And if the company culture is saturated with burnout, mm-hmm. it's not going to be energizing and encouraging for the leaders as well. So there is a bit of a reciprocal relationship there. Mm-hmm. And that reciprocity really points to how we need to change the paradigm of the underlying company culture. Things mm-hmm. like valuing wellness, both physical and mental wellness, modeling self-worth and boundaries to really protect ourselves, our time and our well-being are valuable. And when leaders can demonstrate that through conversations, through their boundaries, their work hours, the things that they are taking on and how they are communicating their expectations down through the rest of the company, mm-hmm. then the employees see that and realize this is something that maybe I need to pay attention to as well, because my executives are showing me that this is important.
Yeah, so the leadership has to quote unquote stand tall and be the example that they want the culture to follow. And so with that being stated, everybody is busy. Everybody has expectations, outcomes to meet. And so, with all of those expectations, those overscheduling, those exhausting nights and early mornings to meet your outcomes, how does one make realistic time for wellness and healing burnout?
Sure. There are some fairly simple things that we can build into our day. And part of it is adjusting our mindset, like I said, to value things like our boundaries. I've seen some companies changing their work schedules so that they're not using Fridays for meetings. Fridays are the day to implement everything that came up at the meetings during the week. Maybe deciding to not take on certain projects and communicating that certain new projects will not be taken on during this period of time so that we can focus more on current tasks and maybe maintaining instead of expanding into other areas. Certain boundaries around work time. Some companies are instituting work hours, maybe a 7 to 7 rule where emails and communication can happen during that time, but after that, everything gets turned off. And sharing with people, this is how we will operate, and the leadership will be doing this as well to be that model, and letting people see that this is the way we can start to take back and protect our health and wellness.
Right. And I think one of the key elements is if we protect ourselves, then we are so much productive. You know, some of the strategies I used to use while I was in corporate, and even, as being a small business owner, I make sure that I have my personal office time. And I train around that. So that simply means when you see this symbol, whatever the symbol, it could be a sign on my door, it could have been an email sent out to everyone, and it's consistent so that it will not alter anything. That particular time that I can stay scheduled focused or calendar focused or whatever I'm focusing on without having to multitask so many things. So taking ownership, taking your schedule for a prisoner versus your schedule taking you as a prisoner is going to help you to reduce exhaustion as well and keep your energy level high in order for you to be productive. And that's one of the key elements that I think is so important. So when we're talking about the connection between the mindset and overcoming burnout, what would you say that connection is?
Well, I think part of it is adjusting how we are seeing ourselves and how we are seeing ourselves as related to the bigger collective company culture. So we talked about things like, adjusting our expectations. And part of that is being able to relate to people. Having that empathetic perspective where leaders are putting themselves in other people's shoes rather, and understanding what people are going through during this time, trying to be aware of their feelings, their thoughts, their needs while they are dealing with more at home, while they're in isolation, while they are trying to work and manage virtual school at the same time, and creating those spaces for communication that are not really dealing with work issues, but more for some social connection. And I think when leadership is stepping up in this way, I see it building trust among employees and leaders. They're learning that they are not alone in their struggles, especially as leaders are willing to share some of their personal stories and struggles during this time. Working on listening actively and being present with another person to hear their stories, hear their struggles and challenges. And so I think that mindset of really valuing people as the whole human. Their whole health is important, and the whole person is important, not just the one who is showing up in front of the computer screen for the workday, but everything that they are going through in their whole life is really coming with them to their work. And so when we start to see people in that more holistic perspective, we can better appreciate not only their struggles, but their wellness is more important. That physical and mental wellness is critical to overcoming burnout and valuing all of the elements of wellness.
Yeah, and I think that's a great goal to strive for in corporate America, as well as in the small business ventures. I know it's very difficult to allow that to take place in accordance to the burnout mindset, because when you're burnout, you have a bit of pride. You don't want people to know or understand the difficulties that you're having, because it's so easy to be looked upon as incompetent or et cetera. And so I think that's a discussion that we can have in the near future about how do we turn that around? How do we reduce pride? How do we help managers and executives to be transparent enough to build trust in the workplace and et cetera? So I think I'm going to ask you to come back to have that discussion fully just on that note. And as we're getting ready to close out, share with us one thing. If we can take away one thing that will make a difference in our day, what would that be?
Well, I would love to encourage people to consider that burnout is not a failure, but instead it's an element of awareness. And so if you recognize that you are in burnout, that recognition, that clarity is actually wonderful. That gives you that starting point to work on healing. And you can use this whole self model that we've talked about today, really valuing the whole person and creating those spaces within your company so that employees see your authenticity, feel comfortable to express and communicate what they are going through and what's going on, so that your personal burnout does not move into that company culture burnout as a more widespread problem.
Okay. Well, Courtney, thank you so much for being with us on today and contributing to the nuggets of helping us to have better awareness and insight. And so, audience, I want you to know that we'll be back on the YouTube channel as well as on all podcast distributions next Thursday. So stay tuned. Make it a productive day and utilize the skills and the strategies as well as the information that you've learned today to make a difference in your day. Take it easy for now. Bye.